The C-SPAN networks bring you long-form public affairs programming from the nation's capital and are a public service of your television provider. C-SPAN, created by cable.
Sir?
April Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Long before today, you've been considered a rights president. Under your watch, people have said that you have expanded the rubber band of inclusion, and with the election and the incoming administration, people are saying that rubber band has recoiled and maybe is even broken. And I'm thinking back to a time on Air Force One going to Selma, Alabama, when you said your job was to close the gaps that remain. And with that, what gaps still remain when it comes to rights issues on the table? And also, what part will you play in fixing those gaps in your new life? And lastly, you are the first Black president. Do you expect this country will see this again?
Well, I'll answer the last question first. I think we're going to see people of merit rise up from every race, faith, corner of this country, because that's America's strength. When we have everybody getting a chance and everybody's on the field, we end up being better. I think I've used this analogy before. We killed it in the Olympics in Brazil. And Michelle and I, we always have the Olympic team here. And it's a lot of fun, first of all, just because, anytime you're meeting somebody who's the best at anything, it's impressive. And these mostly very young people are all just so healthy looking, and they just beam and exude fitness and health. And so we have a great time talking to them. But they are of all shapes, sizes, colors. The genetic diversity that is on display is remarkable. And if you look at a Simone Biles, and then you look at a Michael Phelps, they're completely different. And it's precisely because of those differences that we've got people here who can excel at any sport. And by the way, more than half of our medals came from women. And the reason is because we had the foresight several decades ago with something called Title IX to make sure that women got opportunities in sports, which is why our women compete better, because they have more opportunities than folks in other countries. So I use that as a metaphor, and if in fact we continue to keep opportunity open to everybody, then yeah, we're going to have a woman president, we're going to have a Latino president, and we'll have a Jewish president, a Hindu president. Who knows who we're going to have? I suspect we'll have a whole bunch of mixed up presidents at some point that nobody really knows what to call them. And that's fine. Now, what do I worry about? I obviously spent a lot of time on this, April, at my farewell address on Tuesday, so I won't go through the whole list. I worry about inequality because I think that if we are not investing in making sure everybody plays a role in this economy, the economy will not grow as fast, and I think it will also lead to further and further separation between us as Americans, and not just along racial lines. I mean, there are a whole bunch of folks who voted for the president-elect because they feel forgotten and disenfranchised. They feel as if they're being looked down on. They feel as if their kids aren't going to have the same opportunities as they did. And you don't want to have an America in which a very small sliver of people are doing really well, and everybody else is fighting for scraps, as I said last week. Because that's oftentimes when racial divisions get magnified, because people think, well, the only way I'm going to get ahead is if I make sure somebody else gets less, somebody who doesn't look like me or doesn't worship in the same place I do. That's not a good recipe for our democracy. I worry about, as I said in response to a previous question, making sure that the basic machinery of our democracy works better. We are the only country in the advanced world that makes it harder to vote rather than easier. And that dates back. There's an ugly history to that we should not be shy about talking about.
Voting rights?
Yes, I'm talking about voting rights. The reason that we are the only country among advanced democracies that makes it harder to vote is it traces directly back to Jim Crow and the legacy of slavery. And it became sort of acceptable to restrict the franchise. And that's not who we are. That shouldn't be who we are. That's not when America works best. So I hope that people pay a lot of attention to making sure that everybody has a chance to vote. Make it easier, not harder. This whole notion of election or voting fraud, this is something that has constantly been disproved. This is fake news. The notion that there are a whole bunch of people out there who are going out there and are not eligible to vote and want to vote. We have the opposite problem. We have a whole bunch of people who are eligible to vote who don't vote. And so the idea that we put in place a whole bunch of barriers to people voting doesn't make sense. And then, as I've said before, political gerrymandering that makes your vote matter less because politicians have decided you live in a district where everybody votes the same way you do, so that these aren't competitive races. And we get 90% Democratic districts, 90% Republican districts. That's bad for our democracy, too. I worry about that. I think it is very important for us to make sure that our criminal justice system is fair and just, but I also think it's also very important to make sure that it is not politicized, that it maintains an integrity that is outside of partisan politics at every level. I think at some point we're going to have to spend, and this will require some action by the Supreme Court, we have to re-examine just the flood of endless money that goes into our politics, which I think is very unhealthy. So there are a whole bunch of things I worry about there. And as I said in my speech on Tuesday, we got more work to do on race. It is not, it is simply not true that things have gotten worse. They haven't. Things are getting better. And I have more confidence on racial issues in the next generation than I do in our generation or the previous generation. I think kids are smarter about it. They're more tolerant. They are more inclusive by instinct than we are. And hopefully my presidency maybe help that along a little bit. But, we when we feel stress, when we feel pressure, when we're just fed information that encourages some of our worst instincts, we tend to fall back into some of the old racial fears and racial divisions and racial stereotypes, and it's very hard for us to break out of those and to listen and to think about people as people and imagine being in that person's shoes. And by the way, it's no longer a black and white issue alone. You got Hispanic folks and you got Asian folks, and this is not just the same old battles. We got this stew that's bubbling up of people from everywhere, and we're going to have to make sure that we, in our own lives, in our own families and workplaces, do a better job of treating everybody with basic respect and understanding that not everybody starts off in the same situation, and imagining what would it be like if you were born in an inner city and had no job prospects anywhere within a 20-mile radius? Or how does it feel being born in some rural county where there's no job opportunities in 20-mile radius? And seeing those two things as connected as opposed to separate. So, you know, we got work to do. But overall, I think on this front, the trend lines ultimately, I think, will be good.